You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Silver Screen Science here on the Common Descent Podcast. This is our series where we look at the science of movies, not just the little technical details of what they got right or wrong, but how science and scientists and scientific concepts are portrayed on the big screen. This year, our Silver Screen Science theme is Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
This is our third episode in this year's series. We did the original Planet of the Apes. We did the remake from 2001. This episode, we are discussing the first in the most recent Planet of the Apes franchise, the reboot franchise, called Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This movie came out in 2011, directed by Rupert Wyatt, and stars such names as James Franco, Frida Pinto, the incredible Andy Serkis, and plenty of others. Actually, one of the reasons we decided to do Planet of the Apes for Silver Screen Science this year is because last year, the most recent movie in this franchise came out.
Yep.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Still good.
Now, in this episode, we're going to talk all sorts of science-y stuff, but for those of you who are on our Patreon, we will have a companion episode of More Thoughts, where we will just talk about our personal thoughts about this movie. Spoilers, all good stuff.
Yep.
What a fun movie.
Yeah.
We're going to get into it, but before we go any further, this is the spoiler warning. There's a More Thoughts episode for every episode of Silver Screen Science, so you can check out all 3 Silver Screen Science episodes this year and the More Thoughts if you're on Patreon. And then on Saturday, April 26th, we will have our Silver Screen Science live stream for anyone to join us on YouTube, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Come join us and talk about movies and stuff.
Yes.
Now, before we go any further, it is important that we give a spoiler warning. We will be discussing this movie in its entirety. We probably won't mention much about the rest of the films in this franchise. We'll focus it here on the first movie. But if you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen until you've seen the film.
You've been warned.
Will, what happens in Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
In this movie, it is a modern take, so happening in the modern day, and apes taken to a medical lab, a medical business that is looking for the cure to Alzheimer's and is doing genetics alterations, treatments on these apes to help them heal their own brains, which seems to be going swimmingly until one of the apes goes rogue, gets shot, and they find out it was because the ape had given birth and was protecting her young. Lab gets shut down, ape goes home with James Franco, and turns out it inherited this gene therapy and is now becoming smarter instead of healing, and we get our first smart ape. Caesar the ape grows up, discovers the world's not very friendly to apes, and eventually decides apes need to rise up, and starts the rebellion that will eventually lead to the Planet of the Apes.
Yes. Yes, I didn't really think about it until you just laid it out like that, but this movie does start out kind of like Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah.
With we're making the thing super intelligent as a side effect of our attempts to do medical research on them.
Yes, and Alzheimer's as well, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. Well, hey, let's get into the science of the thing. As usual, let's start off by talking about the creatures that are featured in this film. As with the previous 2 Planet of the Apes movies that we talked about, the creatures are mostly apes.
Yes. Apes, humans, and horses.
And horses.
They do show up in
horses,
this one.
Absolutely. I feel like there's got to be at least one other living thing.
There's a dog.
There is a dog. That's true. That's right. Yeah, in a very memorable moment. There's a dog. There's also redwood trees,
yes,
which is very fun. Mainly, the focus is on chimpanzees. Like, the main character is a chimp, Caesar. There are gorillas. There's one main gorilla, but then there are others that show up. And there is one main orangutan, and there are others that show up.
Yes.
So much like in the previous 2 movies, we've got all 3 of the great ape lineages represented here. Whereas the first movie portrayed its apes as ape in name, but human mostly otherwise.
Yes.
And the second movie tried to, the remake tried to sort of strike a balance between human qualities and ape qualities. This movie, they are very ape-like.
Yeah. We start with normal apes.
Just normal. Which I think is the first time outside of that one chimp that was in the Tim Burton one. This is the first of the 3 movies we've talked about that has a bunch of just normal chimps and gorillas and stuff.
Yeah, that are mainly featured, and we get to watch them gain a lot of their more anthropomorphic traits as their intelligence is boosted through this new medical science.
Yes. This movie put a ton of effort into realizing these creatures as the animals that they're meant to be, even though it's Andy Serkis running around doing what Andy Serkis does, which is mocap being non-human creatures. The apes are extremely ape-like.
Yeah. And this franchise is famous for them going through, like, the other actors playing the other apes in their mocap suits, going through training, ape school.
Ape school.
And really putting effort into trying to capture as best they can the physicality and mannerisms. I remember seeing one interview, I think for the recent one, but still it applies, of them talking about, like, remembering that they don't have the same, like, mobility of the spine that we do, so you can't bend your backs the same way.
Yes.
And so really obvious effort was put into making them as... If you just showed someone a clip, like certain clips of this, it would look like one of the dinosaur CGI documentaries. Like,
yes.
It would just look like a CGI scene of a chimp, and they are rendered so accurately that I don't think most people would immediately go, oh yeah, that's some crazy sci-fi movie.
Right. They look just like chimps.
They look really good, and it's impressive.
They also move and act very much in a very realistic way.
Yeah.
They're moving around the way that apes would. They're making the noises that apes do. Whereas in the Tim Burton movie, a lot of the ape stuff was, a lot of, like, super jumps and being super strong. In this movie, Caesar has his little home early on, and he's swinging and he's jumping. He uses apes-like communication and vocalization. The actors learned how to make what different noises, right? When they laugh like a chimp laughs. It's that like panting sort of thing. They put a lot of effort into making them feel like animals.
Yeah, and it's cool that they're using their body language as part of the storytelling mechanism for, like, the interactions between the different chimps and the different apes. And there's definitely some anthropomorphizing going on just to make it clearer to us what's happening.
Absolutely.
And so that you don't have to be Jane Goodall in the audience to be able to read exactly what they're feeling and expressing. But a lot of it is very just like watching chimps at the zoo, and you're still able to put 2 and 2 together most times, go, all right, I get what interactions are happening.
Yeah.
And it's really nice. It feels like, much like those old scenes of The Lion King where they brought, like, lions into the studio to draw the lions. It feels like you obviously went and took some real documentation to get some really good info on these animals.
So then by later in the movie, when the apes are becoming intelligent, they don't feel like humans who look like apes.
Yes.
They feel like chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans that have human intelligence.
Yes.
They're still moving like the animals that they are. It's very cool. And they show off that they are strong the way that apes, right? They're not super strong.
Yes.
They're just extra strong. They're not super durable the way that animals in movies often are. They are impressively not monsterified animals.
Yeah. They walk that line surprisingly well, because they also do something that most other movies that feature chimps don't do, which is most movies play them down as funny ape characters, the comedy relief.
Yeah.
And give the false perception that it's like, yeah, chimps are just these cute, silly animals, and you could just go give one a big old hug, which is not true.
No, I mean, you could.
You could.
Don't.
It would be your last hug.
Don't hug a chimp you don't know.
Yep. Chimps are famously known for potential aggression and the displays of aggression being sometimes hyper-violent.
Yes.
That they will make dominance displays, and their dominance display is to maim whoever they are showing dominance over. So, like, chimps get this rap for being cute, silly animals. And so a lot of people don't realize that they're actually quite intimidating and can be very scary if you are in close proximity with a full-grown chimp.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, whereas in the other... when you go to Planet of the Apes already established, what's scary about it is that it's not humans, but running society, and they don't see you as one of them. This movie doesn't get to that point, right? It isn't a Planet of the Apes yet. So this movie does lean into the natural qualities of these animals that would make them scary if they decided that they had enough.
Yeah.
And had the power to do something about it.
Yes, exactly.
That a chimp is not, a chimp's not a superhero, and they're not invincible. But if a chimp decides that it doesn't like you and it has the ability to express that, that can be a dangerous animal.
Yes.
And this movie does a really good job of displaying how these animals can be dangerous without making any of them seem like monsters.
Yes.
And especially because so many of them are characters. They have names, they have personalities. A chimpanzee is the main character of this movie.
Yes, that is the leading protagonist.
Absolutely. And so we learn how he is. And there's even that moment when Frida and Will are talking, and she's like, this is going to become a full-grown chimpanzee.
Yep.
And that will be a difficult animal to handle, to take care of.
That will not be safe to have in your home. He's not going to be small and cute his whole life.
It is very rare that a movie manages to give you an animal character who is both sympathetic and feels realistic as an animal, and also is believably dangerous.
Yes.
Usually it's one or the other.
Yep.
And this movie does a great job balancing them.
So yeah, it's really impressive, and I appreciate them exploring that side of chimps, because I feel like it's educational. Of like, you've probably been given a false perception of these animals, and the truth is they are a very large, powerful animal. They're not small and cute. They're actually it's very much like being in the room with a black bear. Like, that is a powerful, potentially dangerous animal.
It's not the biggest or most dangerous of the bears, but it's still a black bear.
Yes.
Now, in the interest of being scientific and critical, there are a few areas where they certainly are taking some liberties with the animals.
Yes.
I would say, generally speaking, they're like, strength and stuff is, for the most part, is pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Like, they're shown being strong, but in a way that feels believable for an ape to be strong. The one exception to that in terms of their physicality is, and I know I never really paid attention to it until this time we watched it for Silver Screen Science, especially there's like a particular span of like 5 minutes of the movie where apes are just over and over again bashing through glass windows and doors.
Yep.
Which we've talked about before is a thing that even for an animal as powerful as a chimpanzee, not a safe thing to do.
Yeah. Yep.
You will hurt yourself and cut yourself and maybe just bounce off the glass.
Yep. Like, they would probably fare better than you or I in the fact that they've got a thick layer of fur. So, like, that's going to help. But glass is real sharp when it breaks.
Yeah. Well, it's also strong.
And it's tough. Like, that's going to be a major force to break through. So, like, even if you do, you might have a concussion depending on how you broke through it.
Yep. And you might not even break through it. You might bounce off and just be hurt.
And if you do break through it, that, like, glass is so sharp. Almost all of us have had a negative experience with glass at some point. And a big shard of pane of glass, I don't know that most people have had an experience with that. They are unrealistically sharp.
Yeah.
Like, those can cut down to the bone surprisingly fast. So, like, people who go through windows are almost always hospitalized.
Yes.
And in serious condition very often. So, like, that is
Yeah, it is a movie trope
Yes.
of you're strong, it's the action part of the movie, you go through the glass.
And like in some of the scenes, I can give it a bit of a pass because it's like, yeah, you're breaking out of chimp prison.
Absolutely.
Like you're running for your lives in this moment. So things happen. There are a couple of scenes where it's like, did every single one of you have to choose a window?
Yeah, they all chose a window. They're like, no, this one's mine.
Yeah.
And now you.
Couldn't you have done a line and all gone out to the one?
The other thing that they do is the way that the chimps are displayed, the apes in general are displayed with their intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, once the apes are treated with this virus treatment, they can do whatever you want because now they are supposedly their intelligence has been enhanced. But even before we see that, there are some parts of the movie where the apes are acting in a way that is a bit more human and a bit more communicative than is probably reasonable for these animals.
Yeah, it's they've definitely humanized their communication. At least, and I could see this just from a storytelling, they've streamlined.
Yes, and I was going to say, it really is just to make the movie go a little smoother.
Because animal interactions are not nearly as clear cut and, yes, I can see they're having a conversation. That's not how animals, like, they don't emote and communicate the way we do.
Yes.
Even if they're even using their own sounds, it's still not the same pattern.
There's a moment where Caesar and Buck, the gorilla, come to like an agreement.
Yes.
In a way that it perfectly fine within the context of the movie, but it is one of those things where it's like, okay, we are humanizing these creatures a little bit.
Yes.
Probably the most obvious example of this is in their sign language.
Yeah.
Caesar can't speak, mostly. So Will, the doctor who has taken him home, teaches him how to use sign language, which again, Caesar is a super smart chimp, but he does meet Maurice the orangutan, who also is they are able to have a little conversation in sign, which is a thing that is famously attributed to apes.
Yep.
But has been scientifically controversial.
Yes.
That whether or not apes actually are able to communicate with sign language is questionable. There are a lot of famous examples of like Coco the gorilla that have been revisited and questioned as to how much communication were they actually doing as opposed to just mimicking signs. But it has become a very famous feature associated with apes, specifically with great apes, that they can communicate through sign language, which in real life, not really the way that we think about it as people.
Well, and I think the biggest mistake that, and this movie does it, and that is made when people think about those signing gorillas and great apes, is, like you said, it's highly debated whether they actually are making sense of the signs or if they've just connected some general meaning or the rough meanings. But what is definitely true is that they do not now know the human language through sign.
Yes.
And that's one of the things, like, Maurice is coming up with words that he's heard the humans say.
Yes.
If no one taught you the sign for Rocket at some point, then you don't know how to say Rocket's name. You also wouldn't know how to translate of like, well, I know how to spell Rocket. No, you like...
Right.
You don't know American English because you were taught some American signs. And so there's definitely that issue, that misinterpretation, that teaching. It's kind of like just because your dog knows what the word walk indicates doesn't mean that it understands the word walk.
It couldn't necessarily use the word walk in context.
You know what your dog whining at the door means. You don't know how to speak dog because of that.
Exactly. So this movie does lean a bit into some of those animal intelligence tropes, some of that anthropomorphizing.
Yes.
But for the most part, these are incredibly impressive depictions of these animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, there are horses.
Yep.
And they're great. The 100% horse.
We know they make it all the way to the end.
They're doing a great job.
They have made it through every apocalypse thus far.
Horses present at all times, seemingly unchanged.
Yeah.
Undeterred by what's going on in the world.
They do well with apes.
In addition to the apes, this movie also features a whole lot of scientists. People who are sciencey folks, or in some cases working with the animals. So our main human character is James Franco's character, Will Rodman, who works at Genesis, which is the name of this company that makes medicines and stuff.
Yeah, this medical megacorp.
So he's like a biochemist or a molecular biologist or whatever, and he helps to design the medical treatment that he ends up making the apes smart by accident.
Yes.
And he is a very interesting example of a movie scientist.
Yeah.
Because he is a good character.
Yes.
And in the movie, we are shown that he is a relatively good person. Like,
yes.
He's good-hearted. And he is an extraordinarily irresponsible scientist.
Yeah. I paying attention to it this time, I was struck by a couple of things of, one, he's working for a corporation.
He's working for a corporation.
It's not a lab, which is, a lot of typical movie scientists is just, a scientist in at their lab and just going off the rails. Here it is a place out to make money, so the morals are already questionable and skewed, and the priorities are, and that plays into what happens in the film quite heavily.
Yep.
And then they also add that his motivation is driven by personal grief. His dad is suffering and on the tail end of Alzheimer's.
Yes, which doesn't, there's nothing wrong with being personally motivated in your science, but as we see in the movie, it does lead to him cutting corners or doing irresponsible things with the science that he shouldn't be doing. He's trying to rush it.
Yes.
Because he's hoping that the treatment can be finalized in time for him to help his dad with it.
Yeah. The movie begins with him seeing promising results for one chimp and then trying to push for human tests because he needs this result to work before his dad dies from Alzheimer's.
So in the beginning of the movie, things go wrong and the project is shut down, and there's a lab tech guy whose name I don't know, who is told to put down all the chimps.
Yeah, he's the chimp handler.
The chimp handler, his job, handle it. That's what he said. You're the chimp handler, handle it. Which, great line.
Yep.
That's Stephen Jacobs, who is the guy in charge, I guess, the CEO of the corporation or whatnot.
Yes.
Who is shown to be pretty money hungry.
Yeah.
Like, he very much, again, he doesn't seem like he's a pure evil character, but every time he talks with the scientist, it is very much like, yes, we're going to make so much money off of this. We're going to get our investors involved.
Well, and it's one of the things I like about the way the science goes wrong in this film, as opposed to a lot of other scientists run amok films, is that this one feels, and maybe I'm just being generous because I love this movie, but this one feels much more like it is showing an example of when all the wrong things line up. You have a scientist who is desperate for the research to work because of personal reasons, working for a person who doesn't care as long as money is being made and is willing to bend rules and takes shortcuts if it leads to money, and them working on something that is a incredibly questionable product to begin with.
Yes.
So it's very much this, when enough safety measures have been removed and they all happen at the same time, disaster strikes, which is real world, like Chernobyl and things like that, are examples where it's like thing after thing went wrong or was ignored or was handled poorly, and it led to a disaster, a true actual disaster.
Yes.
And so I like that the film feels like it's much more telling a medical Chernobyl than it is just being like crazy scientists out there just doing what it at no point does it seem to indicate like, yeah, this is what they're doing. It's like, no, this company is a bad company and they're allowing this horrible thing to happen because they aren't keeping track of the stuff.
Well, and much like we've said for some of our other movies, the scientist characters in this film, especially James Franco's character, feel like humans first.
Yes.
Like, when I sat down to go, who are the scientists in this movie, I did have to have a moment of like, oh yeah, I guess James Franco is a scientist.
Yep.
But because that's not the first thought, that's not his defining characteristic, we get to know him as a person, which means that he feels like a scientist. He feels like an actual person who could be a scientist, but he also just feels like a person.
Yes.
So the chimps all have to get put down, but the lab chimp handler discovers the baby because the one chimp had been pregnant, and he says, I'm done euthanizing chimps, so I'm out of here. And Dr. Rodman also can't bring himself to euthanize the chimp, so he brings it home and just starts raising it. And once he discovers that this chimp has inherited this gene treatment, he starts raising the chimp and documenting all of it and turns it into sort of a personal experiment that he's running.
Yeah.
Which, you're not supposed to do that
Nope.
as a scientist. And then we get to, by far, the most questionable science thing that he does, which is once he discovers that this chimp is impacted by this treatment, he gets a hold of some of the medicine and he treats his father with it.
Yeah, his dad has a particularly bad day, and he, in his desperation, steals some of the medicine, the experimental medicine, from the lab and treats his father with it.
Yes. Which is a huge scientific no-no.
Yes.
Both for, like, obviously ethical reasons, but also that's not a sound trial.
No.
The sample size of one person that you're personally connected to that's not how a scientific experiment is done. And what I really appreciate in this movie is that eventually, he discovers that the treatment is wearing off, so he goes back to Genesis to talk to the CEO, and he's like, hey, we need to do more trials on the medicine. I injected my dad with it, and it works. And the CEO is, at first, he's like, what is wrong with you? That's incredibly irresponsible and unethical. But then he's like, but it works?
Well, and then he says he didn't just heal, he got better.
Yes.
He was better than he was before the Alzheimer's.
And the CEO goes, oh, so we're going to make a whole lot of money off of this.
You're talking about a drug that makes people smarter. We can charge whatever we want for this place.
Yes. That he is willing, and it is very interesting that James Franco is willing to break scientific rules of ethics in order to help a person that he cares about.
Yep.
Stephen Jacobs is willing to break scientific rules of ethics in order to be corporately successful.
Yes. And
both of which is what allows this to happen.
Yeah.
Because then he brings in a bunch more chimps. We get introduced to Koba, who's just a delight every time that he's on the screen.
Yep.
And that is really when things start to go off the rails.
Yes. Another thing that just reminded me of with Koba, that's not actually directly connected to him, but the movie starts with the chimps in the first trial run getting captured from the jungles of Africa. And they're getting captured by poachers. They're carrying guns. They are not some official,
Yeah, there is an implication that they are acquiring these animals through improper means.
Exactly. So, and we see later that also they're getting chimps from the chimp sanctuary that are selling chimps to the lab.
Yeah, so there's a space, because we'll talk about this again. There is a sanctuary where chimps are being kept that I guess are chimps that don't have a home or didn't make it to the zoo.
Well, in similar situations to Caesar, where they needed a home because someone bought one as a pet illegally. They used to be part, Maurice the orangutan is a circus orangutan. Different situations, which is a real life thing. Like, there are sanctuaries for, someone has a tiger. They're not supposed to, but now it needs to go somewhere.
Yeah, and not every zoo can just take a tiger.
Exactly. And a lot of these are socialized in a way that makes them unsafe to be around maybe other people or other animals.
Yeah, and they can't go back into the wild.
Nope. So they've got to go somewhere. So you have these sanctuaries that are holding areas, and it's just, this is where they're going to live now until we either find a better home for them or they live their life out.
So in this movie, there is a sanctuary that has chimps, at least one orangutan and at least one gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
So the company is getting their chimps from a variety of different, not necessarily properly vetted sources.
Yeah, it definitely feels questionable as to how many corners are they cutting? Do they really care? And as long as they get the chimps to run their experiments, are they fine with whatever the answer is?
Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot of that corporate corruption vein running through the events and showing how it compromises the scientific efforts and causes a lot of the issues. Like at the beginning, Jacobs is resistant to moving forward because he doesn't see how it's going to make money until he sees the evidence. Once he sees how much money it could make, he starts pushing the experiments to go faster than even Will is comfortable with.
Yeah. Dr. Rodman comes back and he's like, you have to stop because there's unintended side effects. And he's like, absolutely not. We're going to make so much money. This is great.
Yep.
Also, those are sort of the main scientist people. We also have Frida Pinto's character, who is a veterinarian.
Yeah, works at the zoo as a chimp vet.
Who doesn't really do very much science-y in the movie.
Yeah.
Really, she sort of helps advise Will. She also has that moment of when she realizes what he did, reacting like, all right, I love this person. Like, they fall in love. I love this person. But also you did an incredibly unethical and irresponsible thing.
What you've done is wrong.
Yes.
And the way what you are still planning to do is wrong. Like, and it is, she's our insights into chimps. She gives a lot of the information on them. And then also the perspective on this is a wild animal and the things that are happening around and to him are not okay.
Yes.
And it's
yeah, the whole movie has that there is this constant undertone that things are happening that shouldn't be happening. That this is clearly going in a direction that it shouldn't be going. It's going to build and break at some point, which of course it does because it's a movie. Yeah,
and there's lots of like little notes. Like the whole reason things go wrong at the beginning with the chimp running rampage is because they were going to show the chimp off to the board, which is like, why would you bring a chimp into the boardroom? And it's, well, yeah, because from a corporate perspective, that's great PR.
Yes.
That's a incredibly dumb idea.
Here's our smart chimp.
that is such an awful idea. Why would you do that? And they're like, we're running late. Get this chimp ready.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, that's not how you handle wild animals.
Also, the animals in the facility are being kept in these like tiny little cage cells.
Prison cells.
Kind of like we saw in the Tim Burton version. They're also kept in little cells in the sanctuary.
Yes.
Where they each have their own individuals, like jail cells.
Yes.
It is built very much intentionally to evoke the image of a prison.
Yeah, they even have the same like that you'll hear in prison movies and
the doors close and open. The only other scientist character that comes to mind who isn't actually really a scientist and doesn't really do much, but I just want to mention that Brian Cox is in the movie.
Yes.
Who is the guy that runs the chimp sanctuary, who is another one that is like, there's nothing about him that is inherently problematic, except that the sanctuary he runs clearly isn't treating the chimp super well. He is susceptible to being bribed into giving his chimps away. Much like a lot of the other characters in the movie, this is a perfect person who is perfectly fine, but it takes relatively little prompting for him to start doing unethical things.
Well, and it's like he's not being overtly horrendous and just detestable in everything he does, but his staff mistreat the animals, and he is fully acknowledgeable of it. He portrays the way the animals are going to be kept in a very different light than he actually takes them. It's obviously just a business to him. They are not important. He is the one sending them to the lab to be experimented on.
Presumably because he's getting paid.
Yep. And so, like, it's one of those where he is a very believably not great person.
Yes, exactly. He's not evil.
Yeah.
But he's not great.
Yeah.
His son, who works at the place, is a real bad person.
Yes.
Tom Felton gets to be in this movie and gets to be a real bad person.
Yeah, like full-on abusing animal psychopath kind of.
Yes.
like
the kind of person you put in one of these movies.
Yes.
So that the apes have a first person to deal with as they make their way up in the world.
Yep. So yeah, it's very interesting. Well, and like the way they portray like Will doing science feels very believable in the way he's like making observations and coming to his conclusions. So it's an interesting balance in this one of some of the typical scientist tropes of, scientists not being careful enough.
Yeah, you're doing personal experiments, acting unethically, following the money, those sort of movie scientist tropes.
And dabbling in things that are inherently dangerous and questionable as to whether or not we should be doing them, at least the way you're doing them. But then also, like, they don't feel like caricatures of scientists.
Yeah, they're not. There are tropes in there, but they don't feel tropey.
Yeah.
They feel like very reasonable and realistic depictions of bad scientists.
Yes.
Of scientists behaving badly, but still feeling like human people.
Yes. Well, and it all feels like things of, like, I can absolutely picture real world scientists going through experiences that parallel this.
Absolutely.
Of being desperate, and that is a thing that comes up, of like being desperate for what they're doing to work because they need it to for their livelihood. They need it to, and there have absolutely been historical moments where morals got bent and shifted because a desperate person happened to be the one doing the science and bent the truth or bent the policy.
Yeah, it has an interesting feel to it because it is at sort of its heart a story about mad science gone wrong.
Yes.
But there aren't any mad scientists in it.
Yeah.
This isn't one of those. This isn't like your scientists were so preoccupied with if they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. These scientists did stop to think if they should and concluded that they should.
Yes.
And they were wrong. Right?
Yes.
They went the wrong direction.
They believed the ends justified the means because of the very specific situations each individual was in.
So it isn't a case, which is so often what happens in movies like this, where it's, a person did a science and was careless and maniacal, and it blew up in their face. This is much more of a slow build. This is much more of, we did a bunch of stuff that was fairly reasonable science. We bent the rules a little bit here and there, and we did that just too much.
Yes.
And it got away from us.
Well,
so it's a very interesting depiction of movie science.
Yes.
in this respect.
And another moment that will likely we will talk more about in our science section is eventually the virus they use breaks out, and it breaks out because the chimp handler doesn't report an exposure.
Yes.
That he gets exposed to the new virus, the new treatment, and doesn't report it until it's far too late. At which point he doesn't report it officially.
Yeah, he tries to go find Dr. Rodman at his house.
Yes. And
ends up spreading it instead of getting it handled.
And that, as well as a number of other moments and just little details throughout the movie, to me very much reads as, because the labs this company keeps is a very lax. Yes. They don't have policies. They don't have strict adherence to safety guidelines. They are hiring people and not paying them super well, because we see his apartment and it's tiny.
Yes.
And so
also he gets fired once the project is shut down.
So it's very much gives once again that feeling that the way this company is handling science is just making this perfect storm of things to go wrong.
Yes.
And so it once again doesn't feel just like, these dumb scientists. It's these specific people in these situations not handling it well.
Yes. It feels so poignant to be recording this discussion the week that Colossal's direwolves hit the news.
Yep. If I could absolutely believe someone watching this movie and being like, this is still a bit much, right?
Yep.
But actually,
this is how it happens.
Yeah. And
Rise of the Planet of the Wolves. Now, you already started, we're starting to go in that direction to talk about the scientific concepts in the movie. Obviously, one of the big sort of direct science things here is medical research and gene therapy.
Yes.
The treatment that they've developed is meant to be, it is a virus.
Yes.
That delivers... I think it is supposed to be like genetic alteration.
Yes, it is.
I guess it because it's inherited.
Mm-hmm.
That it is going in and altering the genetic makeup of the patient, of the host, which is a real thing.
Yeah, that is, like, we're still in the very beginning infancy of gene therapy being a real thing in the real world, but viral delivery systems are kind of the go-to way to do that, because that's what viruses do.
Yes.
They inject sections of DNA into cells and alter the genetic code of that cell.
Yeah, and so we can manipulate a virus to do it the way that we want it to do, in a way that also isn't dangerous.
Yes.
Now, in the movie, this gets inherited, and then it also becomes a disease.
Yeah, because...
The implication is that this makes humans sick.
Well, and it's the second dosage they do. When it stops working for his dad, it's because his dad's immune system has begun to fight off the virus.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes and makes a more virulent strain for the second version, and it turns out it's too virulent for humans.
Right.
And when it gets in us, it becomes an infection.
Now, that is something that I don't know the science. I would think that if you're going to make a virus to deliver gene therapy, that it should be not possible for it to be infectious. Kind of like a vaccine.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, yeah, that there's virus bits in there, but it can't do an infection. It can't spread.
Yeah, like the whole way a virus infection works is it puts its DNA in the cell, reprograms the cell to make more viruses, and then the cell bursts, and those go on and do those steps over again.
You cough the viruses out into the air and stuff.
But if you've not given the genetic instruction to make virus and pop cell, then it shouldn't be able to spread, period.
Yes. I'm sure an epidemiologist would have more insights into like what are the sort of scientific mechanics of this. But at least at a basic level, yes, gene therapy is a real thing, so that's very cool. No, I don't think it should be possible for gene therapy to turn into an infectious disease, as far as I understand.
The only explanation I can think of, which isn't stated in the movie, but the situation...
Now it's headcanon.
Yep. But the situation that it happens is he designs the new strain at home.
That's true.
And then when he tells his boss how much money they could be making, they rush it to test. So my headcanon and explanation would be, yeah, he didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
Because he was rushing it, because his dad's Alzheimer's was coming back with a vengeance, and he was feeling time slipping through his fingers. He was doing it at his home office, where he does not have the same materials he would at the office at the lab. And the first test they do is when the exposure happens.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no test before they are giving it to Koba the chimp. And so it is the first run of this new virus he made effectively in his bedroom.
They also make the second, because the first trial is an injection, I think.
Yes.
But the second version of it, it's aerosolized.
Yes.
They have a gas mask, or like a whatever that mask is in a hospital that gives you the oxygen mask, I guess. But it's got the virus in it that that's how they deliver it. So then it becomes an airborne thing.
Exactly.
So spoilers, as we said before, but the way that it ends up working is that this becomes a virus that when chimps, gorillas, or orangutans get infected by it, it makes them smarter. And if humans get infected by it, it kills them.
Yes.
That it is fatal.
And they throw out a line when he is starting to feel the chimp handler starting to feel the effects and sneezes, and he's like, "Oh, you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, it's got to be a cold. These guys' immune system is way stronger than mine." They make a line. They throw a line out there that great apes' immune systems are stronger than ours, which is one of those where I don't know if there's actually any basis.
I would imagine that there isn't.
Yeah, I assume that's more just either to make the movie work or just off the general vibe that animals are tougher than us.
Sure.
That like when you see a wildebeest with a bite out of it and it seems to not be noticing the wound.
Yeah.
Because they just seem to not we seem to be wimpier than just about every other animal.
It could also just be a joke.
Yes.
That he's just being light about the situation.
But the movie does seem to lean towards like, no, yeah, their immune system better than ours. They can handle it. We can't.
Yep.
And that's why the disease spreads around the world, knocking human civilization down as it kills us and giving apes around the world intelligence.
It is interesting to think about what it must mean for the virus that it can infect these 4 particular species. Because lineages, because it infects humans, chimps, gorillas, and orangutans. We never see that it is infecting other monkeys or even gibbons, but it works in gorillas, chimps, and orangutans in a way that is different than the way it works in humans, which suggests that there is something about hominids, great apes, that allows the virus to infect them, and then there is something specific about humans that means that it's fatal for humans.
Yes.
Which isn't completely out of the question.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that set humans apart from other great apes.
And there's lots of moments where it's not that one's immune system is weaker than the other, but it's just, you've got a quirk.
Yep.
And that quirk.
Your cells have this one extra little molecule on the outside of them, and that's where the virus
One of the genetic changes that sets us apart from the other great apes turns out to be one of the things the virus messes with too much.
Yes.
And it triggers the virulent aspect of the virus. It makes me think of things like box jellyfish are not evolved to kill humans. It just turns out that their venom and our cells do not get along with each other.
Yes.
And so they are incredibly deadly to us.
It's kind of like catnip.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not what that molecule in the plant is meant for. It's meant to interact with insects and stuff. But it just so happens that there's a genetic quirk in cats that makes them react to it in a very particular way.
Yeah.
The other thing, and maybe the biggest science concept that sort of hangs over this whole movie, is the depiction of intelligence. The whole idea is that this treatment alters the genetics of the apes in some way that makes them more intelligent.
Yeah, it allows the brain, the whole premise for healing Alzheimer's is it allows the brain to grow its own tissue and therefore heal its own damage, which is something that our brains, if you damage it, it can't heal like your muscles or your skin.
Yeah, I think we struggle to make new neurons.
Yeah.
Brain cells are hard for... I don't know if it's that we can't make new ones or if that it's limited, but I think there is some truth to that.
Yeah, to my understanding, there is in it that effectively brain damage is physically permanent.
Right.
You can make new pathways, and people can, through therapy, improve and get back, but the actual physical damage is effectively permanent.
Right.
The whole point here is that the brain now can heal like a muscle can.
Yes. And so the idea is that the brain is expanding or growing or becoming more complex or whatever.
Yes.
That is making these chimps and other apes smarter.
Yeah, that in a healthy brain, it just improves the brain instead of healing damage.
Yes. This is something that comes up a lot in sci-fi, and it's come up on the podcast before, this question of intelligence and how we define intelligence and what does it mean to be intelligent and how is intelligence related to the physical structure of the brain, all of which are very nebulous and unclear concepts.
Yes.
In the movie, intelligence is really just they can think and act like humans can.
Yes, exactly.
The first sign that they show of intelligence, that they show Bright Eyes, Caesar's mother, is solving it has a name.
Lucas Tower?
I think it's the Lucas Tower, which is a puzzle where you have to stack the things on top of each other in a certain order.
Yeah, you have to move rings from one to the other without ever putting a bigger ring on top of a smaller ring. So it's all about progressively shifting them over.
Yeah, so it's a puzzle to be solved, which is a way that we test intelligence in a lot of other animals.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the first signs of that it is sort of this critical thinking and problem-solving intelligence that these apes are beginning to develop. We also see that Caesar gains language learning intelligence. He is able not only to sign, like full conversations in sign language, but he can understand when humans talk. He can understand English.
Yes, he can make full sense of a sentence spoken to him.
Yes. So the intelligence really is doing things that humans do.
Yeah. And which for these specific animals, their brains becoming more like our brains is not actually that huge of a leap as sharks getting more human-like intelligence and so forth. So that's not as crazy as a lot of other smart animal movie type things.
Sure. It is a very simplified and streamlined concept of intelligence. There's no indication that, language is tied to a specific part of our brain that might be different from other species. So there's not really a reason to think that if chimpanzee brains got bigger or whatever, that they would develop the same language skills that humans have. They also start getting, existential thoughts.
Yes.
Like, Caesar has a moment when he's... and it's not depicted as him getting smarter, as so much of it's depicted as him growing up.
Yes.
He is becoming an adult, where he says, what is Caesar?
Yeah.
Right? Where did I come from? Why am I can tell I'm different from everybody else. Why am I like this? Caesar is having an existential crisis in the film, which, as far as we know... other species can't have.
Yeah,
at least not to the way that we think about it.
Yeah, not in the way we would recognize. They don't have crisis of identity that way us humans do.
Yes. So that intelligence in this movie really is just shorthand for you act and think like humans now.
Which makes sense for the franchise.
Absolutely.
But it definitely is leaning a little bit, if unintentionally, on those tropes that more intelligence means more like us.
Yes. Well, the apes also start, walking around upright more than before. This is especially accentuated later on in the franchise. So the apes adopt this more erect posture like humans, which kind of doesn't make sense scientifically. That just because you're smart doesn't mean you would stand up.
Yeah, it's implying that their bigger brain now means they have better posture and, better motor skills. Which, there could be some argument for motor skills and fine dexterity.
Sure.
But it doesn't make any sense that would be more comfortable for...
Well, your hips aren't shaped that way.
Yeah, your hips aren't shaped that way. Especially for the orangutans, your feet are not shaped that way.
Yep.
And so, this would be a painful way for you to walk.
And it looks that's what the actors have to move the chimps do. And when they're walking on their hind legs, they have to move in this very awkward fashion. Because, of course you do. This is not a bipedal animal.
Yes. Chimps and gorillas absolutely can move around on their back feet. There's great videos of gorillas running around their enclosures really quick on their back feet. I can't remember which zoo it was, but there's one male gorilla that likes to play kidnap his offspring because the females don't want to leave them with him, but he likes to spend time with the young. So scoop them up and then run around the enclosure as he's chased by the females, and he runs on his back feet. So they definitely can move around that way, but it's we can walk on all fours.
Yes.
But it's awkward and uncomfortable.
It's not great.
And we're not good at it, and it hurts your back after a while. It will be much worse for you to try to do that. So it doesn't actually make sense why they would shift to standing upright.
Yeah. They also make very human facial expressions, which, again, as shorthand for the movie makes perfect sense, but they don't have the same musculature that we do. So, again, the intelligence very much is intelligence equals human behaviors and mannerisms.
Yep.
Probably the most notable one of those, which is, again, shows up much more often later in the franchise, but happens here in this movie, is that it is implied that the treatment has given them the ability to speak.
Yes. And this is one of those where animals absolutely can mimic human sounds.
Sure. And they can also communicate with their vocalizations.
Yes. And the idea that if you could somehow increase their memory capabilities and problem-solving capabilities, that they might be able to start figuring out how to mimic human sounds better.
Sure.
And keep more in their head.
And even the idea that if you enhanced those aspects of their brain structure, that they could develop full spoken language of some kind. Yeah, that there is a logic there too. Those things might be connected to that.
Absolutely. The movie definitely seems, though, to be suggesting that they are now smart enough to speak like humans.
Yes.
Not mimic human speech, but speak like us.
Yeah, they have spoken English conversations.
Yes.
Not so much in this movie, but in the later parts of the franchise they do.
And that's one of those where, like talking about them not having the same facial muscles as us, they cannot make the same sounds physically.
Yeah.
Cannot make the same sounds the same way we do. Like, if they want to make a same noise as us, it's like a dog doing the, I love you.
Yes,
Like,
like the dolphins
Yes.
that would do mimic human speech with their blowhole.
Exactly.
Like, that's extreme. Or like parrots. Parrots
Yes.
are a great example of this. Parrots don't have basically any of the same throat and mouth structure that we do. When they speak human language, they're doing it in a very different way.
yeah, like, when we do an F sound, we're using our teeth against our lips, which is something parrots don't have either of.
Either of us.
So, like, animals can mimic us, but they're not going to be doing the same mouth movements.
It's like when people do the elephant noise. When you ask, when people do that, between the lips, that is approximating an elephant noise. That is nowhere near how an elephant makes that noise.
You need to do it with your nose.
Yes, yeah,
which
just
we
with your
physically
nose.
cannot do because I can't pitch my nose shut with my nose. So they're suggesting that they are now able to just fully speak the human language, the human tongue, and they're moving their mouths in the exact same way we would to say the same words they're saying.
Yes.
And that is not physically possible for a great ape.
Yeah.
Their mouth is too long. Ours being scrunched in is part of what gives us the ability to make the sounds we do.
Their throat shape, where the larynx
Yep.
is positioned is different. So this is really, in a movie that it does a really good job feeling very grounded, this is the part where they take their logical leap.
Yes.
In much the way where we've talked about Jurassic Park, where it's like, a lot of what goes on in Jurassic Park is actually pretty sound and relatively grounded. The big leap is the DNA thing,
Yes.
which doesn't make sense and could not happen. This movie's big leap is this medicine makes you act like a human.
Yeah. And that's how sci-fi works.
Absolutely, yeah. This isn't to say the movie's a bad movie because it does that.
But this is that moment in this sci-fi concept is connecting those two dots. And like I said, this is a very common thing that when we talk about smart animals, we usually mean crows, elephants, apes, dolphins, animals that are good at problem solving and communicating and are super social like us.
Yes.
All things that are famous for us. So it's a very biased measure of intelligence.
Yes, this is a trope that's similar to how all animals in Disney movies are cats or dogs.
Yep.
How intelligent animals in movies are often just humans.
Yes.
And that's sort of the trope of what does intelligence mean? Whereas I think it would be fascinating to see a movie franchise say, all right, what if chimps were human level intelligence, but had chimp physiology? What would a chimp language look like? What would their behavior, how would that change?
Yeah.
I think that would be a fascinating speculative evolution thought experiment. I understand that is not what this franchise is for.
Exactly.
That the point of this franchise is to get us to 1968. Dr. Cornelius and Dr. Zira and Dr. Zayas have to have arguments in properly, fully fluent spoken English.
Yes.
That's where we're headed. So yes, I understand why they don't do that here. But I do. It is a retreading of a very popular sci-fi trope.
Well, and they do an interesting job of, we talked about with the last film, the 2001, where they kind of switch. And I saw someone on the Discord call it seemed that like they're almost trying to do code switching, where they will be very human and then very ape, and then very human and then very ape.
Yes.
Here they do blend the two a lot more.
Yeah, they do a great job.
They will have human-like, more human-like expressions, but then ape-like body language. And they, even if they're talking, they will be talking, but once again, also showing an ape dominance display when they say no.
Yes.
And so they are blending the two a lot more, which is really cool. It's
very cool.
A very cool, that does lean into the speculative aspect that you were talking about of how many parts would stay, how much of your communication would stick around because it still is functional, and how much would be replaced with a more efficient spoken or signed form of communication? And that is a cool question.
Yeah. There's so much cool science to talk about with this movie. This is a really good one for a discussion like this. Listeners, if there's anything that you think we've missed in our science discussion, or if you have further thoughts on that, feel free to let us know. You can hop in the Discord. You can also join us for our Silver Screen Science live stream on April 26th. Now, in Silver Screen Science, we try to talk about the broad picture of science. We don't just want to nitpick specific little things that they got wrong, but it is also very fun to nitpick specific little things that they got wrong. So at the end of every Silver Screen Science episode, we like to give ourselves a chance to do some mini rants. Will, what is your mini rant for Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
My mini rant is about some of the practices that seems are in the lab at this company. This company is evidently obsessed with branding, with brand visibility and awareness. One of the things we see throughout the film is they're testing this new medicine. It is fully experimental. It has only been tested on chimps and not a very...
It is in trial phase.
Yes,
like
fully.
Animal trials.
But yet, like, they make special customized vials to administer it that has the name of the experimental drug on the vial. Later on, when they make the aerosol version, we see a package of them that is saran wrapped, that is plastic wrapped, with, once again, the name of the company and the drug on the plastic wrap. So you had to go to a printing company to get custom printed plastic wrap and then shrink wrap it to the experimental drug that you're transporting just within your lab.
Yep.
So, like, why is it being... You're making the drug here.
Listen.
So where are you shipping it from? Are you just wrapping it to then move it across the hall so they can unwrap it?
The CEO is like, listen, what we're doing here is so important. There are bound to be leaks. And when photos leak of our labs, I want people to know.
They're going to look so good.
I want the branding forward.
And it's like when they show off the drug to the board, they have a graphic of the Lucas Tower and like an animated 3D graphic that someone took time to digitize and design
for this PowerPoint presentation.
That is a very common movie thing of who put this PowerPoint together while Godzilla's running around to explain what Mothra is. Well,
yeah, somebody.
Yeah.
One of the writers. Yes. Someone in the art department did it.
But this one just has a number of moments of like, yeah, but that would cost you so much money. Like, not just time. You had to get another company to make that for you.
Yeah, you had to contract somebody to do that.
I want this printed on it. You're not allowed to tell anyone this name.
Yeah, don't say what this is. You had to sign an NDA to make these little vials for us.
It's very silly to me.
My mini rant is pretty mini. I had a hard time finding a mini rant for this episode. At the very beginning of the movie, Bright Eyes, which is the name of the chimp that we start the movie with.
Yeah, because they get green flecks in their eyes when the virus takes hold. We forgot to mention that.
Which is actually a totally reasonable thing. Yeah. That you get what's called pleiotropic effects, where changing the gene for one thing cascades into a completely unrelated thing.
Fully just a random side effect, because that's how complex DNA is.
So they capture Bright Eyes out in the jungle. She gets brought to the facility, and then she is the first chimp that they do the treatments on. Oh, she's one of the first chimps.
She's the first one that they see like marked improvements on.
Yes. So she's in the lab for at least weeks, probably months, while they're doing these tests and observing her progress and all that. And then she goes haywire and she ends up getting killed. And then the chimp handler discovers that there was a little baby in her cell, and that the reason that she became so aggressive was just because she was trying to protect this baby that none of them knew about. There is no way that you had this chimp in a medical experimental facility and did not notice she was pregnant.
Nope.
That, yes, we were talking about how this place cuts a lot of corners and is doing very, unscrupulous scientific practices. but you're doing medical research on this animal. You're telling me at no point did you take a blood test
Yep.
in the months that this animal was there to notice that she was pregnant. Absolutely not. That's not how it works.
Well, you didn't listen to their heartbeat and notice there were
There were two heartbeats.
Yeah.
Just everyone in there doesn't know anything about chimps.
Yeah,
They're just like, hey, I did this ultrasound to see, is that normal? Yeah, I guess that's just what chimps' insides look like, because they have extra hands in there.
Like a space marine. They just got 2 of every organ. Yeah.
So that's pretty silly.
Yes, that is. Even for how bad you all are at your job, that you should have accidentally noticed that.
That should be unmissable. You should absolutely have had to notice that. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this science-y discussion. If you enjoyed this and you haven't, go check out, we've done like 20 Silver Screen Science episodes at this point. This year's theme was the 3 Planet of the Apes films that we discussed. As we mentioned earlier, there will also be more thoughts for all of these bonus episodes available exclusively on our Patreon. And on April 26th, Saturday, 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, on our YouTube channel, we will have a Silver Screen Science live stream where we'll just chat with anybody who shows up. We'll talk about movie science and apes and stuff.
Yes.
This has been a super fun Silver Screen Science series.
So interesting, so much fun.
So fun to revisit these movies. We were not sure at first if there would be enough to talk about to do basically the same movie 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But these 3 movies are delightfully different from each other. And there's so much fun comparing and contrasting to be done.
Yeah.
We're off to record more thoughts about Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Spoilers, we love it.
Yep.
So head on over to Patreon if you want to hear us talk about that. Otherwise, listeners, hop in the Discord, hop in our comments and chats and stuff, and let us know your more thoughts about Planet of the Apes and all of this fun science-y stuff. And we'll have to see what the next time we talk about movies is. There's a new Jurassic World movie coming out this summer.
Yes.
Which... maybe we'll have to talk about that.
We'll see. I've seen people already trying to put together potential trios for future.
Oh, yeah.
On the Discord, people trying to find good trios.
Absolutely.
If you come up with a good one,
send in your suggestions.
Saves us the work.
Absolutely. There's no rule in the guidebook that says that our listeners can't suggest episode topics.
There you go, right at the end.
That was for Ryan. That was for you, Ryan. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.